Ant McGinley. I'm your host for today, and I'd like to welcome and introduce you to a very special guest in a moment. But regular listeners might notice something a little bit different to the show today. That's because this show is all about having a focus on the people and businesses and stories of Shrewsbury. And I thought what would be quite nice for this episode to focus the story and the person on the usual host of this show. It's Mr. Alex Whiteley.
Hello. That's so surreal, being introduced to my own show.
This is the ultimate bit of fame. Hello, my name's Ant. I'm a podcaster, and over the years, I've done a lot of work with Alex, but we've never actually met in person. We've done a lot of stuff virtually like this, and we were supposed to get together, and then something happened, which meant we couldn't really travel, but we're hoping to get back together. And I live in a slightly different part of the world. I live in Hebden Bridge in West Yorkshire, and I'm looking at setting up something very similar to what Alex has done with the Shrewsbury Biscuit podcast. See what I did there? I've said it 3 different ways already. And so I thought what would be really good for me is to find out a little bit of information about that, but also in terms of an episode of The Biscuit, to have Alex as the guest, because you all know Alex. He's the one that asks the questions, that goes around. You'll recognize his face. He's doing all sorts of things. He's, baptizing babies. He's opening supermarkets. He's hosting dinners. He's the best man at last minute for
running
a wedding.
Away from the screaming fans.
Yes. But he's always asking the questions. So what I thought would be nice is to switch it around and ask him the questions about the origins of the biscuit. I'm not sure if this is going to be a particularly momentous number of an episode, is it? It's not going to be like number 100.
No, we just release it as Ant McGinley. Yeah.
This is how it rolls. So, Alex, thank you very much for coming on to be a guest on The Biscuit. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much. This is the funny thing, right? Because when I went on Jim's show, Jim Salverson, who I've mentioned on the show a few times, again, we've worked together, never met. I went on his show, and I'd say I'm slightly above average host of a show. I mean, The Biscuit's been going for nearly 4 years, over nearly 400 episodes. Not bad. But as a guest, I'm kind of like, So this would be interesting. Really well.
It's I'm not trying to push you out of your comfort zone. I'm going to make this nice and easy, nice and gentle. And as I'm sure you say to all your guests, if there's anything you do say that you think might get you in trouble, we can always edit it out. Except I'm not going to. So, Alex, just talk to me about where the idea came from, because when we first sort of popped up into each other's radar, this wasn't even a thing. I don't think this was even an idea that you were having.
No, when we first met, I was very much in Thor skin mode, which I don't have to put emphasis on anymore because people that listen to Biscuit will know what that is. I was very much working with. Was I with Tom Bruno at the time? It may have been before Tom Bruno even joined in America. No, it was a very geeky podcast. I started making podcasts very much influenced on Kevin Smith and the kind of sweary, larky kind of pub behavior kind of humor, which I love, by the way. I still love doing, but I thought I wanted to do something that's a bit more meaningful, a bit more sophisticated. And I was like, well, what can I do it on? And then I moved to Shrewsbury, and I fell in love hard with the town, and I'd never really lived anywhere that I actually adored and felt proud to live in, a town. So I was like, I can't make a podcast about this town. I know nothing about it, And then I realized that was the kind of the click, the draw, is that I could learn about the town while the listeners can. But the name Shrewsbury Biscuit comes from the Shrewsbury Biscuit itself. If you're listening from outside Shrewsbury, maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But Shrewsbury does have a biscuit named after it. It started off as the Shrewsbury Cake, and there's actually a building up on top of Castle Street in Shrewsbury with a plaque on the outside that says, "This is the founding place of the Shrewsbury Cake," which went on to be the Shrewsbury Biscuit. And one day, I'm going to own that building. I keep saying.
Wow.
So. Yeah,
and is that going to be like your own place, or will that be the studio where all the biscuit empire grows from?
Talking at my backside, I'll probably never have enough money to afford that building, but one day I'd love to own it. But yeah, that would be my studio downstairs, and I'd live upstairs and be the biscuit guy through and through.
So there's a couple of things that I want to ask you about, and maybe these will all merge into one. But first of all, I'm very interested in the fact that you've come in as an outsider into where you are now, and that's very similar to my position right now. And so I'm curious as to how you've been. Obviously, you said you fell in love with the place. Was it the way that people accepted you and welcomed you into Shrewsbury that allowed you to be that way?
Very much so. I feel like the people here, that they're so proud of their town. They're genuinely, and there are a lot of people over my years of doing this. I've spoken to so many people that moved here 20 years ago or something, and just don't want to leave because it's just a beautiful town. It's great to look at. The locals are really, really just great. They're so proud about their town. They're great to speak to, welcoming, as an outsider, I feel like it was easy to learn about this town because people are just so willing to talk about it.
So what you've really done with this podcast, and I'm reading between the lines because it's kind of the idea that I had, is you've turned the whole process, which can be a little bit awkward for some people, of getting to know the area and getting to know people. You're basically turning that into a circular thing where,
so instead of reading the A to Z.
But also the thing is that it can be so easy these days, especially on the back of lockdown, to just stay in every day and get takeaways and get shopping deliveries and those kinds of things, and work from home remotely, which a lot of people are in that situation. But you're going out, you're meeting people, you're going to where they work or where they live, or meeting them in a coffee shop in the town as well. And so through doing that, you're also getting to know the place and feel comfortable in it. And obviously this is over 4 years, but I just wonder if you could take us back to those first couple of episodes, those first few interviews. Like, how did you feel? Were you very nervous the first time you went up to? So who was the very first person that you went up to, and did they ever agree to do an interview? I suppose that's the best way to start that.
No,
question.
What I did was I tied them up, and it's like, you will speak to me. No, actually, this is a weird thing to sort of admit, I guess. I don't think I've ever spoken about it, but I always dreamed of doing radio or doing something like this, but I was always scared I'd be too nervous on the microphone. Or, right, before I did this, I hated the sound of my own voice. And I always thought I would get on the microphone and just be like really terrible, have a terrible voice, right? But when we first fired up Thorskin, me and James Rose, Jimmy, my old co-host, I got on the microphone and I was like, oh, that's not too bad at all. So I was confident in the fact that I could speak in the microphone. So first of all, that's a really important thing, because this is something you need to work on as well. You don't just step up to a microphone and something. You can, I guess there are people that are just naturally gifted at that, but there are things you need to learn yourself away from, like the ums and the ahs, and we've really spoken about this before. But as far as speaking to people, away from the microphone, I do have social anxiety. Like I'm very awkward at going and speak to people. If someone recognizes me, which it does happen from time to time, they're like, "Oh, I know, I listen to your show." I'll be like, "Oh, thanks for that. I really do appreciate it." I get really weird unless I'm behind a microphone. And I learned this with Thorskin. I had Charlie Adlard, co-creator of The Walking Dead. He's a Salopian, lives in Shrewsbury.
Wow.
Yeah, he came around my house, and I was very nervous. Had Tom Bruno on the computer in Vermont. Charlie came into my house, and I was kind of really nervous about it. But then once we started chatting, I realized this is just the normal guy. It doesn't matter that he's like the super famous Charlie Adlard, blah, 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 blah. Just a normal person. But also, my underlying reason for doing anything with audio is to help people and to help a community. That drives me. It really does drive me and gives me encouragement. So there was always that drive to do it. So it made it easier to go out and ask people to come on the show, right? So I printed off some business cards. I went around town. I literally canvassed the whole of Shrewsbury for like 2 days. If you know who the Shrewsbury Biscuit is and you know who I am, you'll probably remember that day because I was a sweaty, greasy guy walking around in the middle of summer going, "You want to be on my podcast?" and I give you a business card, right? And it's really hard to sell that in a second and not look like a businessman. I got like 6 people interested in coming on, and I sat and I planned it and I arranged dates to interview people. And the first person I spoke to was Mike from Stop Cafe. which is a cafe in town. They had 3 at the time, but it's a nice brand, and people was always busy. And so I went and spoke to him, and it was just about learning about his business. How did this business become a business? What did he do? How did he go to making it? And it was surprisingly really, really easy to do. You know, because you talk about someone that's created a business with their bare hands, they want to talk about it. They're passionate about it. So that kind of eased. In fact, thank you for that, Mike, because you kind of eased me into it, I guess. So he's the first person I interviewed, but the first episode I released was with author Simon Bell. The reason why I released it at first is because I think it was time sensitive. I think it was something that was due out, and I was kind of like, I need to get this out first. And that was he's an author on Auschwitz and genocide.
Wow.
And I was like, this is so talking about the Holocaust on my first episode, I thought was going to just kill me like straight off. I thought, oh my god, you can't go in that deep. But actually, people really enjoyed that episode, and I got lots of really good remarks about that, because it's all about Simon, really. He's so brilliant at talking. So yeah, they're my first couple of episodes.
I find it really interesting what you said about how this social anxiety, and that's not something that I tend to suffer from. I'm very much a person who can engage and go into a room. So for the first thing is that I don't fully understand this, but I'm very interested in that switch that you found where having the microphone relieved you of that, because what I found is actually the other way around, is when you go to interview somebody, the microphone can really put them off. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll have a little lavalier clip-on mic that I'll put, because then they forget that it's there, and then they talk more normally. Whereas once you put a microphone in front of people, there's one of two things can happen. First of all, they think that they have to be really close, so they lean right into it like this so every word can be heard. Or you get the other thing, which is where they're really sort of frightened of it, and so you need to be the microphone to be within a certain distance to get a nice clear sound without picking up the other background sounds or whatever.
That's something I've battled with for many. So carry on.
What happens is the closer you move the microphone to them, they kind of recoil in horror, and so you find yourself until you hit a corner or somewhere dangerous. So that's a little tip for you. Is I literally have I've got an old iPhone and a little lavalier mic that plugs into that, and I just have a little piece of recording software on that. I hit record on that, pop it in their pocket or pop it on the desk, and clip the microphone on there. And then that way, even if they move away, I'm going to get a clear recording of the audio.
That's clever.
But there is something really psychological about people being frightened of the microphone or not understand how the microphone works. So I find it really interesting that you find the microphone liberating.
I don't know what it is. I really can't put my finger on it. But I think it's because I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I'm good at something. If that makes sense. It kind of spurs me on a bit. It is interesting. And with the microphones, I've had for years. I mean, obviously, I've got people come and use my equipment and stuff. And I'll set a microphone up in front of them. As you know, there's either the arms or there's the stands. And it doesn't matter if what you're using. You'd be like, right, no, get that microphone right up, because this sounds really good because it's on StreamYard. But when you're recording locally, you need to be quite close up and what have you. So I'm like, get right up in that grill. So I will say, smell it, right? Smell the microphone. Don't worry, it's clean, it's fine.
I always think of those classic images of the children being interviewed, and they think it's an ice cream and try and chew the muff. It's funny how the things that you learn. One of the things that I think is really important with what I do psychologically is improvising, right? So this is one of the things I used to do with Thorskin is if someone would come in as a new host, or we had someone that would sort of join the team or whatever, I would run him through something that's called the gauntlet, and we still do it today. And the gauntlet is an improv exercise. It starts off with... Do you want to actually try it with me now and just do it, and then we can...
I can do.
It works for real,
okay, so I can't do all 3 rounds. I might actually have a speed round here somewhere. Let me have a look. But I want you to talk... I'll find an object, and I want you to talk about it for a minute, non-stop.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so this is usually the three rounds was the inanimate object, the speed round, and what the F is that round. And that was where you'd have to describe 10 pictures to someone when they can't see it and you can't tell them what it is. The speed round is 50 questions in a minute. You can't answer as many. No, you can't. That's the whole point. You got to go as quick as you can to answer as many. And then the inanimate object round. So here is your object that I want you to talk about for a minute. And I'll let me get. Am
I allowed to say exactly what it is and just talk about it?
You can talk about. Yeah, you can. You can talk about it. You can make stories about it. And your time starts now.
So, especially for people that are just listening to this rather than actually watching the stream, what I'm talking about here is named after something which was fairly innocent 2 or 3 years ago, but after what we've all just been through and is still ongoing, the word Corona takes on different meanings. However, the one we're looking at here is the bottle top from a bottle of Corona lager, which is very popular, especially on a nice summer's day, the weather of which we've both just had. I'm not sure when you're listening to this, but we're on the back of a couple of days of really good weather. And there's nothing quite like having a nice cold Corona, especially with the lime. Now, the really interesting thing is, having drank Corona on a beach in Mexico, I learned that's where the lime came from. And you'll find if you ever worked in the bar, there's this mixed thing as, does the lime go into the bottle or does it sit on the top? Actually, what they do in Mexico is, just because limes are so readily available, they cut a piece of lime and they put it in the neck of the bottle, not to flavor it. It's just to stop the flies getting into the bottle.
There we go. Way. And that was effortless for you, and that's because you've been talking for years. You know, I feel like the more
again, this is an interesting thing for me because you don't have that background. You don't do this in your day job. So I want to kind of take it back, and you talked about pre-Biscuit doing Thorskin, but pre any kind of podcast, I want to see what was the tipping point of where you went, I want to go and do this, or this is an idea, and without necessarily doing the sort of like, you know, where you found the equipment, those kinds of things, because that's kind of fairly straightforward and boring, but just what was the inspiration for you, and how did you put it into action? Because people have great ideas all the time, but don't take it forward.
Well, I came into listen to podcasts quite late on. In 2015, I started a new job where I was working by myself in an office during the night, and it really knocked me psychologically. I was like, oh my God, like, because silence is really bad for long, like, it's proper really isolating. And I was like, this is not going to last. I'm not going to be here longer than 6 months because I'm not going to be able to cope. And somebody's like, well, on a podcast. And I was like, who's a podcast? You know, like everybody does. And my friend was like, well, have you heard of Kevin Smith? I was like, yeah, I love Dogma. Who doesn't love Jay and Silent Bob? And they were like, well, Kevin Smith is actually one of the pioneers for podcasting. He's got these, and he gave me Edumacation and Fat Man and Batman, or Fat Man Beyond, it's called now, and the Hollywood Babylon. So he gave me a load of podcasts to listen to. So I just chucked them on in the background, and they just changed my life. Literally, just to have something in the background. I wasn't by myself. I was laughing, and even if I was getting on with some work, you just absorb it in a weird way. So they really genuinely helped me, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to help people, and you know, as I'm getting into the podcast and I'm learning about the communities and stuff, I realized that there are people that attach themselves to podcasts because they don't have a huge circle of friends. You know, they don't have a social life. So Thorskin came about because I really wanted to help people, and I always thought you needed lots and lots of money, lots of equipment, and a studio and all that stuff because of Kev Smith is Kev Smith. And then I came across this little podcast called Two Broke Geeks. Still friends with these guys today. And I was like, wow, I want to do what you guys do. So they helped me out. They told me what equipment to get. I started my own podcast with Thorskin. And we managed to bring in like listeners from all around the world. The community got together, and we were getting people messaging us and saying thank you because we'd helped them through their day and made things a lot easier for them. And that for me was just, it's no brainer. This is what I wanted to do.
Wow. That's really an amazing story. And I love how it came from a place of you really struggling. And then you found that within the podcast. And I think this is something that comes up a lot again. In a sense, it's, for a lot of people, it's replaced local radio. Local radio doesn't have the same investment that it used to have even 10 or 15 years ago. And even then it cut down quite a lot. And I think also the thing that you hear time and time again about podcasts is its ability to niche and find an audience. Mm-hmm. And so if you're on the BBC or ITV or Sky, you are beholden to, for sake of a better phrase, bums on seats. You need to get a lot of ears or eyes on what you're producing to make it worthwhile. And we see that again, if you want to make money from your YouTube channel or your Instagram, you need lots of followers, you need lots of viewers, you need lots of clicks, lots of likes, lots of follows, lots of subscriptions, those kinds of things. But then the power of the podcast means you can be so diverse in what you do. You can really focus. This is what a lot of people have talked about for a long time. However, the other thing about it is it's the opposite of local, because as you just said with your Thorskin podcast, is you were doing it from wherever you were at the time, and you're getting listeners all over the world. You're reaching out and it's reaching those people. And yet what you're doing now is the opposite of that. And you've kind of accidentally become one of the go-to voices in what's known as hyper-local podcasting, because you have this technology where this show that we're doing now can be listened to all over the world at any point. China's just started opening up and adding more things to that people are allowed to listen to. So we might find ourselves on there if we put some Chinese transcriptions on the video and on the show notes. But it's purely aimed at people in and around Shrewsbury.
It is, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly just log into our pod, my host, Podbean, which I will be changing very soon.
Yes, because one of the things that you have, those of you that maybe don't make podcasts yourself, which I'm guessing there'll be some of you that do and some of you that don't, probably more of the latter. What you can actually see is not just how many people have listened to your show on a daily basis or over a week's, months, those kinds of things. You can also get an idea where they are listening from. Now, sometimes this is a bit skewed because some people will be using a VPN, which sort of masks their location, their IP address. But for the majority of people, you get a really good feel for where your audience is based. So you would assume that Alex is about to say to us now, all his listeners are coming from the UK. And depending on how good his access is and how much he's paying for his data, he might even be able to tell you which part of the UK. But I have a feeling that he's going to tell us that there's listeners in other places.
Yeah, so we've got obviously the huge 83% of my listeners come from the UK, 5% from the US, 3% from Australia. Then we've got India, Germany, the Philippines, Montenegro, Netherlands, Japan, France, United Arab Emirates, Ireland, Russia. We had for a while there was a huge amount of listeners regularly from Russia, and I was like, okay. But this was a joke that we kept saying on the biscuit for a while. Me and Shane were like, we've got listeners in Russia. Hi Russia, how's it going? So yeah, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. Zambia, Indonesia, Grenada, Cyprus.
So I'm going to issue you a challenge right now, Alex, actually. And so anybody who's listening from outside of the UK who's listening to the show, get in touch with Alex. Let him know where you are. Let him know that it's not just somebody down the road using something that disguises where their IP address is. If you're listening in Zambia, if you're in Australia, if you're in Russia, just reach out, drop him a message. I'm sure it's in the show notes. He'll do it at the end of the show, whatever way he usually does that. But that's a really nice way, again, for you to build up the community. And I just want to, as an example, there's a show just down the road from me here, a lady called Caroline Verdon, who I work on a radio show station with as well. And she has a show called At Least You Didn't, which is her and a friend basically telling all these embarrassing stories, things that happened to them throughout their lives. And they often have a guest on as well, just so they can join in and share those stories. And I happened to be on one episode, but I'm not going to draw attention to it because it's an embarrassing story. So she was looking through her figures the way that you've just done now, and she noticed that she had a listener from almost every continent. And the one that she didn't have was Alaska. And so we had this conversation. I said, you've got to get a listener in Alaska. You've got to do that. So you get that, not just to have that little ping, but get them together. Anyway, she went on holiday down to Southampton, and she took a little ferry, and just for conversations, just speaking to the captain of the boat, and she just mentioned this, what was going on. And the captain went, "Oh, well, the guy that owns the boat is actually in Alaska right now." He doesn't live there, but he's in Alaska. So he messaged, put them in touch, and he listened to the show when she was in Alaska. So now she can legitimately say that her show has been listened to on every continent in the world.
That's insane. That's brilliant. I love that. And like, it just offers, like, when you're doing hyper local stuff, it offers an extra use for the show. Because obviously this is all about community and telling people about what's going on in Shrewsbury, Shropshire. Where can you go this weekend to enjoy something, or who's got this book out, or what's this store doing? But there's also people that have moved away from Shrewsbury that want to know what's going on back home.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the thing is that the first thought comes from almost like an advertising point of view. Whereas if you're saying there's going to be this festival on this weekend, and this band's going to be here, and the speaker's going to be here, and this author's going to be there, that's not really helpful to somebody who's in Alaska, unless, of course, you're going to do interviews with them and they'll feature on future episodes, which is great. They can keep in touch that way. But that thing you said exactly, and actually, all those countries that you read out, it could be entirely conceivable that they're all people that grew up in Shrewsbury and have moved away, or are working in Zambia at the moment, or I've been to, met somebody and emigrated to Russia, all these different reasons, and they listen back. And I have friends, Abby and Albert, and I think you were on a panel with them actually for a conference. I put you in touch, and they run a podcast in Berlin.
Yes, Radio Days.
Abby's American. She met her husband Albert in Berlin. He's from Munich. And she was trying to improve her German. He wanted to improve his English. And so they make this podcast every single day, Monday to Friday. And it's local news from Berlin. So not the kind of news that would make it onto the equivalent of the BBC or Sky, but just the little local stories you get in the local paper. And so she translates them. They write a script together. He checks her transcription. And first thing in the morning, she records the script while he's in the shower. And then while she's in the shower, he edits it and uploads it. And they do that every single day. And a lot of their audience are, as you said, people that lived in Berlin that moved away, but also people that have come to Berlin that speak English that are still trying to get a feel for what's going on. So it's really changed the way that people start to think about who they're reaching and what they're reaching. And there's also, I think, what you start to find when you do this is you're becoming a time capsule. And one of the podcasts I'm involved with started out. It's a martial arts podcast, and one of the motivations for that was an instructor of mine got very ill, and at the same time, somebody I trained with passed away very young, and I got very thoughtful about this, and I suddenly realized that a lot of what they knew and what they'd been through and their experiences was being lost simply because they were no longer with us. And so I was kind of inspired to start going out and interviewing people. And we were lucky enough to interview a guy called Richard Bustillo, who was actually one of Bruce Lee's training partners.
Wow.
And so it was like 8th episode or something. And I was just producing the show. I wasn't doing the interview. And he about a year later, he was out in the Philippines, had a very sort of short illness and passed away. And so when we heard the news, we reached out to friends and family and we said, look, would you mind if we re-release the episode just as a tribute to him? They gave their blessing. And so I listened to it again. And what I hadn't realized the first time around when we did the interview, I was just excited that we had this guy that, had this connection, this history and this kind of legacy. But what we found was what we really got from that episode, listening back to it, it wasn't the stories about Bruce Lee. It was him. It was his personality. There was a lot of talk about jazz music and about motorbikes. And actually, probably 10% of the episode was about martial arts and 5% about Bruce Lee. And the rest was about him as a person. And I suddenly realized that as well as doing that informative thing that you're doing now, you also producing like a vocal history. Is that the right word? You have to forgive me. I'm just getting over COVID, so I still have a bit of the brain fog. But that's there.
It's offering commentary to everything that's gone on over the time that I've been recording, and you know what, there are people that have come on the show that I've passed away, unfortunately. Like a big shout out to Tim King, who run the Cartoon Festival for so many years. We did an interview about a Beatles festival that the mayor at the time, Phil Gillen, was putting on. So and it's nice that you have their voices saved for eternity. Like, it's the internet; they're never going away anywhere. So that's really nice as well. What I like to do with the biscuit is something that we now have the ability to do, because we have a bit of we have a good reputation in the town. I like to think, and that's to get the current mayor on the show and interview the mayor every year. So we can find out a bit about them, because we all think of the mayor as the mayor, whereas actually the last two mayors we've had have been pretty freaking cool. They're really nice people, So that's what we like to do. And then what people can do is go back and listen to the, it just adds a bit of commentary to that picture you may see in a book one day.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that. And I don't think I've ever spoken to a mayor or heard a mayor speak. I've seen lots of pictures of mayors. I've seen them with their chains. I've seen them at various events, but I couldn't tell you anything about them. I'm not even sure I could remember their name. But what you have in this environment of the podcast is it's open-ended. So if they want to come on and they've got a great story, you can extend the episode and you can let that whole story be about that. And it's this opportunity where, especially the way that people listen as well, I think podcasting is still a very intimate medium. I'm very big on all the stats, and I go over to America and I've spoken at a few conferences, and they've just had a big one this last week as we're talking now, where they brought out the latest statistics, and still, podcasting is growing and growing, getting bigger and bigger, but it's still predominantly a solitary pursuit, if you will. People listen on their own. It's growing now. About 20% of people, 25% of people will say that they listen to podcasts with friends, and so that can be while you're driving in a car. Maybe you've got it on in the kitchen while you're both doing housework or whatever.
The best example is, I'm sorry for my language, guys, was Shagged, Married and Shagged, Married and
Annoyed.
Yeah, with Chris Ramsey and his Mrs. Rosie. That is Chris Ramsey is obviously a famous comedian, and they started a podcast together. You get couples that will sit and listen to that together. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. It's this thing, and actually, I've been to the BBC did this true crime podcast a couple of years ago called Death in Ice Valley. Which is a collaboration between the BBC World Service and NRK, which is like Norway's BBC. And it was about this woman's body who'd been found in, I think it was the 60s or the 70s, in a frozen valley with no ID. And when they worked out where she'd come from, where she'd been staying, there was all these different passports and things with her face on, but different names and different nationalities. And so it's a fascinating story. You can still get it. Go and check it out. Look out for that.
Did they do a documentary about that? I'm pretty sure.
I think there's probably been a spin-off documentary that's come off it. But initially it was like a 6-part season, and then they came back with another season as well as a podcast. But when this launched, I was actually lucky enough to go down to London for it, and they debuted it at the BBC Radio Theatre. And so it was very old-fashioned. So I was in this radio theatre where I'm pretty sure that the Goons did some of their recordings. And I was in this theatre with 300 other people, and there was a screen, but we just saw a waveform on the screen when the podcast was being played. Somebody came on, introduced it, said, "This is the podcast, this is what it's about, enjoy." And we played as the first episode. And I sat in silence with 300 other people with the lights down, and on the screen, just this little waveform, for want of a better way of describing it, a bit like when Kit talks to Michael in Knight Rider, just flashing up and down. And that was it. And it was an amazing experience. It wasn't quite, I'm not sure I'd necessarily do it again, but there's a wonderful podcasting has opened up this new way of interacting with audio, I think. And I mean, that kind of event does happen. They have listening parties now. People come together. I mean, possibly this is something that you might start doing, is like a podcast listening club in Shrewsbury, or somebody will. But I think there's on Twitter, if you look for Podcast Brunch Club, they're all around the world, and people get together just like a book club, but instead of reading a book, they listen to a podcast and then get together and discuss it.
That's a really cool idea. I like,
isn't it? Yeah,
yeah.
And it doesn't have to be your own podcast either. It can be others. So where you are now, like you're 4 years into this, and it's gone from being an idea to do this. It's gone from being like the other podcast that you made before. Like, what's the future for the biscuit? Is this part of your life now? Is this a torch that you're going to carry for a little while and then pass on to somebody else? Is this something that you see growing as an empire? You know, like you say, you want to take over the original biscuit building, and it'll become a newspaper and a TV station.
I feel like the biscuit can be anything it wants to be, and I've been moving into different avenues gradually. You know, over time, I've been making more and more vlogs, more visual stuff, which is another thing to move into, because it is visual. It's a completely different thing. So my original plan for this was, I had a really good business model, and that was to. And the people in Shrewsbury will roll their eyes at this, but to open up a coffee shop called the Shrewsbury Biscuit, and then have 2 studios upstairs. One I can hire out that people can use, and the other one, which is the official studio. So the podcast could advertise for the business, and the business would pay for the podcast, and it's just round and round. I'm not sure how that would work, but that was my original idea. But I would love a Shrewsbury Biscuit radio show. If we ever get DAB, I think there's talk of getting a couple of DAB stations over here in Shrewsbury. I'd love to try and get investors for that, but that's a long way down the line. As far as audio is concerned and speaking to a microphone, I feel like on 5 years in, that's not an awful lot of experience. I feel like I'm right at the beginning. So the Shrewsbury Biscuit, I feel like can go anywhere. I like doing the audio stuff. I think it's important. You know, like you said, it is an intimate thing. It's something you can listen to in the car. You can listen to it while you're gardening, working out, whatever. But if I could get a studio where we can have a camera, so we can do a sit down chat every day, daily news sort of thing, and have the podcast run at the same time and get paid for it, that's what I would want. That is the goal. I want to do this for a living. I want to do it for a living. It's just there's no money for it at the moment. There's nobody willing to go, okay, we'll give you £100,000 a year to carry on doing what you're doing, Alex. Crack on, you know?
Well, possibly not, you know, one person willing to give you £100,000 a year, but you might get a few people willing to give you enough that adds up to make it worthwhile. Now, let's talk about this for a minute, if you don't mind, because you're doing all the work. It's a one-man show. It's a one-man operation. And so
I've had people come in and help me over the years. So I can't take all the credit, but yeah, mainly.
But so I'm interested, first of all, as this is something I'm looking at emulating where I live. First of all, getting a nice idea, or a rough idea at least, of how much time you're putting in terms of hours. And I'm talking everything from like hitting the streets, going and meeting people, responding to emails, setting up interviews, doing those interviews, editing them, putting the show out, promoting the show, that whole thing. And I've got an idea because I do a couple of podcasts myself, so I know what that takes. But in the city where you live, and all that going on. And also, I'd like to know about, you mentioned there's a few people have come in. I'd like to know, you know, who those, and it's an opportunity for you to give them a shout out as well. The various people that have come in, whether they are people that have supported you through time, through facilities and equipment, or through funding, because I know there's been some support from the council with that as well.
So we work very well with the Shrewsbury Bid, which is it's a business. They work with a lot of the businesses inside Shrewsbury. They put the money into a pot, and they use that pot of money to try and better the town. And they've commissioned me to different pieces. Obviously, we're a CIC; it's all there for people to see. So, like, you know, they've helped me grow. When I first started, I reached out to Alex Vladimiroff, who worked at Shrewsbury Bid. And I was like, yo, I've got a podcast. It's going to be great for the town, lots of promotion. Can you help me out? Is there anything you can do? And I said, yeah, you can help us out with the Darwin Festival. So they helped me out a little bit. I helped them, and I spent a whole week running to an event with a Tascam, the handheld Tascam, which I've got.
I have one over here actually,
and it's not top tech kit at all. It's literally just a voice recorder. And so I go and I record stuff, and then I go home, take it home with me, and then edit it, release it that day, the same day, and then I go out and do the same thing again. It was really intense work, but I knew what the goal was. What was your question again?
So the people that helped you, supported you, sponsored you, and also the amount of time that you put in. So you're kind of answering both at the same time, which is great. It's exactly what I'm looking for.
So I realized the biscuit was growing very, very quickly, so quickly that the demand was getting a bit higher, because I like to release at least one podcast a week, but I was getting to the point where it's like 2 or 3, and more and more, my emails were going more and more. I was going to events, and I was just like, I need help. So I reached out to my good friend Shane Hinton, who's helping me out with Thorskin at the time, local guy. I was like, dude, we'd be awesome at this. Let's do it. So we did. And then we went to the flower show together, which was really cool. This is the first sort of outing together. The flower show in Shrewsbury is huge. It's one of the longest running flower shows in the country. It is the longest one in the country. And, literally tens of thousands of people go to this thing. It's massive.
You don't strike me as a flower show going guy normally.
It's when you say the flower show in Shrewsbury, to an outsider, they're like, oh, well, flower. It's like a coming together of flowers, and they will. It's like they do look at the flowery stuff in the garden, but they have massive bands. They have food stalls. They have people with selling their wares. They have all sorts you can do. And we went to this event together wearing our biscuit T-shirts. And on the way, like 2 people stopped us and they're like, oh, listen to your show. Pointed to Shane himself. You know, he just, listen to your show. And he's kind of like, really proud. He's like, they recognize me. We were walking through the festival, and a woman grabbed Shane by the arm. He's like, oh, I like the Shrewsbury Biscuit. And, he was getting you could see how big this thing was getting. And then the owner was like, oh, do you mind doing an interview with Scouting for Girls? And I was kind of like, okay, all right, I'm sorry. And it was just like, bam! It was this huge thing. And then it got bigger again, obviously. Then we brought in Julie Fox, who is me, Shane, and Jules. We worked at the prison together because we did acting at the prison, immersive events and stuff. In fact, the first time I met Shane, he was helping me out with with my makeup as a zombie. So it's really cool. So yeah, we worked together. So I knew I could trust in these 3. And for a while, us 3, we kicked some serious butt. We did interviews. If Shane wasn't available, Jules would be available. If on the other way around, I like a 3-way conversation. It sounds better, right? And then we brought in Dee Dee Forward. She was amazing as well. She would come to events. We went during the pandemic. There was a show called the Shropshire Virtual Show in Much Wenlock, and it was in the Cavalier Centre, and it was so they had a stage for bands, and they had people come in the evening during the pandemic, but they had their own box. It was all the sides of this. The Cavaliers a riding school centre thing. Yeah. Had all the sides open, so it was technically outside. Everybody had their own box to sit in, so it was socially distanced. It was legal. It was legal. That sounded like I said it was illegal then. And they had a big camera as well, so people could watch it at home, or they could have booked tickets. And the Shrewsbury Biscuit, we were there hosting the whole event for the whole day, so people would tune in and we'd be like, hey guys, so that was such and such, and coming up next we've got this, and that was our job for the day. And we felt like we'd done it, we've made it, we were the Shrewsbury Biscuit, and that was really amazing. But then what happened after the pandemic, I think a lot of podcasters felt that pinch, is viewership just dropped. I mean, even like the likes of Joe Rogan, everybody went back to work. Yeah. Nobody was out listening to podcasts anymore, and everybody felt that sting. And Jules left. Dee Dee had her own thing going on, so she moved off from that. Shane got a job where he couldn't commit anymore during working nights, so he stepped away. And Jules moved to Scotland. So we're all fine. We're all still friends and stuff, but everybody kind of stepped away. So those are the guys that helped me out. And I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I can't thank you enough, you guys, for helping me out. A couple more shout outs go to James Warman, and to Phil Collins. Those two have been amazing as photographers for me. So they're good friends more than anything. And I'll be like, I've got an event. I'm speaking to a famous artist, Matt Sewell, who paints these amazing birds on the side of buildings and stuff. He's awesome. Do you want to come? And he's like, yeah, okay. So we collaborate. You know, he wants to get these photos. I need a couple of photos too. So we work together. And the same with Phil. And then finally is Amy as well. Amy Tui, who's been helping me out as well. She's so it's more like friendships that people can dip in and out and help as often as they like. So sorry, I rambled on forever then.
No, that's great, and it's really good that these people are getting the credit that they might not get. Yeah. I'm interested in terms of how things are now, because I know you have a regular job. Mm-hmm. I know you have a family, you know, and I'm guessing that you also need to sleep and eat occasionally.
Now and again.
So how does it, when you put everything together, like how do you find the time to do everything that you need to do? Are you just giving up on one of those things? Has your wife not seen you for weeks?
Well, luckily with my job where I work, when it gets quiet at night times, I can sit and whip open my laptop and get a couple of hours editing done, which is fine. My boss,
do they know that?
Yeah, they know it. As long as I get my job done, they don't care. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it on the podcast for sure. But no, yeah, I can do that. And today I've sat like it's very solitary. You know, you're an editor, you do stuff. You sit and you ignore people while you're getting on with your work. My wife is used to it now. What I like to do is I find a coffee shop and I take it. I've got a really good flask cup thing that will keep the coffee warm for ages. And I will just sit in the corner and just get on with it, disappear into my work. And, you know, you're talking about how long does it take from conception to releasing of a podcast? I would say that each Biscuit episode is around 40 minutes to an hour long. So it takes, I don't know, emails, it probably takes a couple of days. But in theory and time-wise, say 15 minutes for the email to be written and for times to be agreed upon. And then you have the interview itself takes, let's say, an hour. Then you take that audio home with you. You edit. I listen back to everything. And that's my advice to anybody that's going to do this. Listen back to your audio because you never know what you might find in the middle of your audio. So I go back, I listen through. And then most of my time is sitting around waiting for things to render, because my process is, and I know there are better ways to do it, is most of my audio comes as a WAV file. I run it through Levelator, which is a great piece of software to get, unless you really want it to sound like really crisp. Levelator 2 is great. You just chuck your audio on there and it brings all the lows up and the highs down and it brings it all together. I then listen back to that, export it as an MP3. I add on my intros, my outros and stuff, and then upload it to my host. And that takes another hour. So I'd say about 2.5, possibly 3 hours, depending on the episode.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
And in terms of each guest that you go when you go into these places, are you having to do research, or do you just not have time for that? That you just literally, your research is getting there and asking them questions?
I think it's really rude to go and speak to a guest. I mean, unless you can help it, unless you can't help it. There have been times I've been at festivals and people just come and sit in front of me and I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm Alex. What's your name? And we find about each other as we're face to face. But if you've got time, at least find out who their names are, the name of the business and what they actually do. But as far as like, when it comes to speaking to, I like to find out the information on the show. So like if I already know the information, I feel like stupid asking it. So I will definitely do a little bit to make sure that I'm not being rude. What's your name again? You know, nobody wants to hear that. But at the same time, you need room to learn, right? So every time I speak to someone and I'm genuinely like, oh, that's really interesting. It's genuine. Like, I've just learned as I'm speaking to them. It adds to it. It really does.
Yeah. I find that, you know, I'm just thinking about it now, and I don't really know Shrewsbury very well at all. But one of the things I do know is with podcasts, and especially a podcast that's built around guests, is a lot of people only last 7 or 8 episodes and then they stop because they run out of guests, they've run out of people, they've maybe not got into their stride with it. You're 400 episodes in.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody left that you haven't talked to? And if so, who is that person, and call them out now?
It's you. No, I'm joking. And you never. I don't think it matters what town you're in. You never run out of things to talk about. There's always somebody that's become of age where they are now an artist, or there's somebody that's releasing a new book, or there's a new event. Even if it's a reoccurring event. A big shout out to Mark from Crush Cancer. He runs this amazing event at the Inn and the Green. Every year, it's a charity auction where he spends the whole year trying to scurry around and get prizes for this auction. We will then use the auction money to raise money for Lincoln Davis, which goes towards it's a cancer charity. Great guys. And he does it every year. But every year I'll get him on the show, like, hey, how's it going? We haven't spoken in what, a year, and it's them kind of shows are really good because people get used to our relationships and stuff. But I would say there are still hundreds, if not thousands of people that I've got businesses that I can get into because I can talk about anything. And I will talk about somebody's business. I'll talk about something they did 50 years ago. I'll talk about if you really go into this with an open mind and look in the nooks and crannies of your town, the places that you've walked past loads and loads of times, go in and say hello. You might find an interesting story there.
Now, I'm guessing and putting this out there, I'm pretty sure that with 400 episodes in, there's bound to have been either a major faux pas that you've made, something hilarious that happened, or horrific, like you've just done the best interview of your life and then realized you forgot to press record.
Loads. Ridiculously loads. I was on stage at the Shropshire virtual show in Much Wenlock, and we were not just were we in front of the cameras, we were on stage as well doing introducing the bands and stuff. And I got to close the festival, which was amazing. So it was great. First of all, the first thing I did was I had to introduce the Dirty Rocking Scoundrels, which are very, very popular band here in Shropshire. If anybody in Yorkshire or wherever you are really wants a great proper rock and roll band, the Dirty Rocking Scoundrels are your guys. Anyway, I'd seen them a couple of times. I knew who they were. And I was like, I've got to introduce these bands. I want to do it properly. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, go for the Jules Holland thing. Go for the Jules Holland thing. It's cool as hell. And the way they start off their show is they have their backs to the audience. I introduce them, then they spin around and they start playing. And I literally went, ladies and gentlemen, the Dirty Rocking Scoundrels. I literally I did an imitation of Jules Holland. I didn't mean to, but I sounded exactly like him. And then when I got to close the show, I was like, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Shrewsbury virtual show. It's the Shropshire virtual show. And I did that in front of tens of thousands of people live. I felt like a right idiot. Yeah.
This is the kind of thing where you see like Bon Jovi doing a gig in London and goes, "Good evening, Glasgow."
Yeah. If I'm in Much Wedlock of all places and go, it's the Shrewsbury virtual show, I'm probably going to get battered at the end of an evening. So thank you for nobody hurting me that night. It was quite cool. I do stuff all the time, and I think, to be serious, I feel it's really important to include these things and to own them. Like nobody likes. You may, I don't know, maybe you like your very strict, very great sounding audio, but there's a human element to messing up and learning as you do it.
Yeah. There's so one of the podcasts I do at the moment, which Alex has done a few voices for, is called Wrestling with the Champ, and it's about a retired wrestler. So if you think Alan Partridge and The Rock having a baby, not for kids, but that's the show. And one of the shows we did, there was a line, the guy I work with, he's a very talented comedy writer, and I was trying to do these lines in character, but I kept laughing as I was doing them. And when we did the edit, he put in one of the lines of me corpsing, and it's just beautiful. It's because it's honest, it's genuine, it's real. And, nobody's listening to our show thinking, well, this is a real story about a real person. They know that there's actors doing it. And it's that, what would they call, almost breaking the fourth wall a little bit, or just like a little inside thing that you go. And you're right. It's one of the. I have heard it back a couple of times, and it just listening to it, I'm not embarrassed. I'm filled with joy hearing it because it reminds me of how much I was laughing at the time.
I say not bad things. I say stupid things all the time. I'm always messing up my lines, but that's just me. And this is what I want people to understand with the show is that I am just me. I'm not trying to be anybody else. It's really important to be honest. I mean, one of my tips, in fact, for people who want to do their own show and make their own podcast locally is be honest. Right, don't go making up something because it doesn't take long for people to find out that you're a bit of a fraud. It doesn't take long at all if you're going to do something locally, and also make sure you got good audio. Right, make sure that I have messed up so badly, and you talk about gaffes and stuff like that. There's a few times where I've got this is a great example. The High Sheriff. I spoke to him earlier in the year, and it was late last year. And I did this interview, and I did it on Zoom. And I very rarely use Zoom to record anymore because I went to record. I've got a very good mixer, great microphone, but for some reason Zoom went, "No, we're not going to use that, mate." They used my laptop microphone, which is at the back of my desk, and I sounded like I was underwater, and there was nothing you can do to that audio. It is gone. It's done. So I had to explain to the High Sheriff of Shropshire that we will not be using his podcast. He's like, "Oh, okay then." And in fact, I went for lunch at Charles Darwin's house on Charles Darwin's birthday in February, and the High Sheriff was there. I was like, "Hi, Tony, how are you?" And he was like, I was recording the speeches with my camera, and he's like, "Make sure you hit record, mate." And I was like, I deserve that.
Yeah, that's awkward. Yeah, that's one of the things. And generally, they always seem to put the microphones on laptops next to the fan, and it seems to be when you consider how good quality the microphones are in your mobile phone and even your iPad or your tablet. The microphones on laptops must be the very last thing that they do. It's like, how much budget have we got left? 12p. All right, that'll do.
Yeah. It is a nightmare, but just keep going though. You've got to like keep moving. That's happened before. It's happened a couple of times. Laura Butler as well. She came on my show. A great guest. I haven't been able to get her back on since. She probably thinks I'm a fraud because again, an interview I did where the audio was so bad, I was like, I cannot release that.
What does Laura do?
You probably I can't remember. Sorry, Laura.
You didn't record it. You can only remember what was recorded.
Yeah. Well, I do want to get back on, but this is the thing, right? I'm not a machine. I'm not an encyclopedia, and there is a lot going on in this head of mine. So, and I'm only human. So these things do happen. You just got to own up to them, haven't you? You know. So
one final thing I'm going to ask you about, and simply from my experience of working in radio and in broadcasting and making podcasts, I recognize that there are times. So I do a lot of football. I'm effectively accidentally become a journalist, even though I've never done a journalist qualification, a broadcast journalist just from the stuff that I've done. But it means that I've almost lost an element of the enjoyment of football because when I sit down to watch it, it's often for work and I'm looking for points so that I can focus on. Sometimes it was in previous incarnations, it's been looking for things that we can pick up on and talk about and make it into a joke or into a sketch.
Other parts just sitting there you enjoy with a notebook.
Yeah, and it's just that kind of thing of like, because really my enjoyment of a football match is going with my friends. I took my godson to his first game the other day, and it's just being able to be in the moment, that experience and cheer and all those kinds of things. But if you've got a notepad and you've got those, you lose that. So I'm just curious as to, like, we started this by talking about how much you love where you are, and you're making this podcast about it. But I imagine that when you go out and about, either you're very much going, "Oh, I should drop a card in there and go and say hello to them to do an interview," or people are coming up to you and saying, "Please, can I be on your podcast?" or "You should speak to this person because they've got a great story." So I wonder, is it a balancing act? Is it that, and you can be honest here because there's only me and you here right now, and
nobody else is going
to, a couple of thousand listeners. Is it that sometimes you can find it really difficult, or is it actually you've found this wonderful combination and it makes the whole experience more enjoyable?
Do you know what? It is hard. It really is hard. We've got Joe Whale in Shrewsbury, Doodle Boy, who has just been signed up by Nike. Joe is a very interesting guy. He's only young, 8, 9, and he was given a lecture in school about doodling, but doodling is all he wants to do. And he's actually now become world famous. He's been on Ellen DeGeneres. He's been on TV. He's now been signed by Nike with, Nindy, who does the drums with Dave Grohl, did the drum.
Yeah.
Nike have collected these really talented, gifted kids, and then they're now world famous. There's literally released yesterday. There's a Nike advert with them on it. It's awesome. And there was an exhibition at the Soden collection on Wild Cop, but I'd already committed to doing something, so I couldn't go and speak to Doodle Boy. And to this day, I feel so bad that I didn't get to do that because I really want to speak to this kid, and I haven't had the opportunity. Now he's world famous. I haven't got the opportunity to go and speak to him. And these are the things that happen sometimes. That I make a commitment. I've got to stick to it. There are so many people that I really have always wanted to go and speak to, just haven't had the time. You said earlier, this is all me at the moment. It is. I plan the things. I record the podcasts. I take them home. I edit them. I release them. I market them. I run the social media, the website, all of it. It's all by me at the moment. If you want to come and help me out, there's more than enough jobs to be done. I'll definitely give you credit for that. So yeah, there are people I really do want to speak to, but that adds to it though.
Yeah,
it adds to it. Like there's never anything to not talk about.
And do you find you're becoming almost like a point of reference for the council, for the local tour guides, for just this kind of thing of like, they all listen to you. So it's kind of like if almost you become the go-to guy. So if somebody asks them something they don't know, they come to you because you're better connected than the council is, than some of these other people are, because you've spent the last 4 years really living and breathing, going out and spending time getting to know people, sitting down with them and having a conversation and really engaging with people.
I think it's good karma. It really, that's not me trying to be. When you sit and you listen to people and you get genuinely involved with the community, not like, I'm going to be Instagram famous, pout darling, XOXO. And if you are genuine and you sit and you get involved in your community and you listen to people and you have, real conversations, it helps you build a good reputation. I think that's what's happened. And it honestly, it melts my heart every time I get an email like, on such and such, so you've been, suggested by such and such. I've got this event coming. Here's a press release. And I'm like, wow, it blows my mind. I'm like, wow, I didn't even have to go and get that interview. It came to me. And I'm so grateful to anybody that does that for me. And I know that there are people that champion the biscuit. There are so many companies, so many people out there that love what I do. I was chatting to Katie Rink the other day. We were having a few pints in the crowning column. And she was like, you've earned your stripes, Alex. You've earned your stripes. And I was like, oh, bless you. She was like, you need to get a job at the BBC and stuff. And I was kind of like, there's an issue at the moment. I think there's a conflict of interest in what I do and what the BBC is. But, it's nice to hear those things, that at the moment there's a good enough reputation here that people come to me now.
I imagine you're quite a good person to go out for a drink with, because I imagine you've interviewed everyone and you possibly don't have to buy a drink all night wherever you go. Or is that the dream? Is that what you're building towards?
Well, I'm hammered after 3 pints, so I'm on a cheap night anyway.
So I'm just aware of the time and we could probably talk for another hour easily. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Alex. Ooh. And this is not premeditated at all. It's just from the way the interview started, the way it's gone. Mm-hmm. And so I want to bring it back to what you talked about when you started. You talked about doing this podcast because you wanted to help people. Mm-hmm. And you wanted to give that back. So, and I know this is putting you on the spot, so please forgive me. But turning that around to you, so the people listening now to this podcast that have been listening to The Biscuit for a while, is there anything that they could do to help you? And that might be something as simple as telling a friend about the show. It might be more, actually, lend us a tenner and I could get my studio.
Well, actually, do you know what? This is one of the things I think it's happening in most towns. At the moment, there seems to be more and more empty shops in the high streets, and it is happening everywhere. But Shrewsbury is very good at filling up those spots, and I do credit Shrewsbury Bid for that as well. They do North Gretna Council, they do great things, and lots of independent stores there. But I constantly find myself peering into windows, going, Biscuit Studios one day, So if there's anybody that listens that has a business and they have a spare room that they just don't use, they chuck all their stuff in, and we can sit there and I can come to a coffee shop and be like, hey, we're the Shrewsbury Biscuit from such and such coffee shop, and every time I do a show I would mention the business. It kind of help each other. If anybody's listening to this and they have space for a studio, I'll make you world famous. That's the dream. I would love we did have and this is, do you know what, actually I should shout out the parade shopping centre in Shrewsbury. They did let me have a studio we had a studio for about a year and a half, I think, especially during the pandemic with it. And what we did was I was making use of their empty units, and I would give the shopping centre advertisement. We're at the parade shops, make sure you come and check it out. It's like a bazaar in the middle of Shrewsbury. It was amazing. And they ran out of empty units, so I was like, oh, okay. It was a mutual thing. They were like, Alex, there's no room for you. So I was like, okay, very good.
Was that because of the success of the podcast, victim of your own success? I'd
like to say so, but I can't. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But it's a great place anyway. It's a beautiful, beautiful. If you're ever in Shrewsbury and you're out of town, make sure you check out the parade shops. It really is beautiful. But no, I feel like it's a mutual thing. I feel like it's. Yeah. So yeah, if anybody's got any space for us at the Biscuit, that would be the nicest thing that anyone could ever do to me. Do for me. Also, I'd love if anybody wants to help out, wants to come and try a bit of hosting on the Biscuit, wants to get behind the microphone and help me out, come to some events, get in touch.
Yeah. I just had a thought there, and I imagine a lot of the places that you go to have a blue plaque around, the English heritage about what was involved. And I wonder if perhaps there's some kind of a blue biscuit that you could give to businesses that are featured on the show.
Well, my mother-in-law is an amazing baker. She really is awesome. She's been practicing. I only found out the other day she was trying out recipes for the Shrewsbury Biscuit, actual Shrewsbury Biscuit. And I was like, and you didn't tell me? So I was like, we should go into business and make Shrewsbury Biscuits, and every guest gets a Shrewsbury Biscuit with the Shrewsbury Biscuit thing, and we could sell. What I don't know. Well, there's an idea there, but yeah, that'd be great. A Shrewsbury biscuit.
Well, Alex, you can treat yourself to one of those biscuits because you've been a great guest. Thank you very much to Alex Whiteley for coming on this episode of the Shrewsbury Biscuit podcast. My name's Ant McGinley. I am your host for one episode only. We will return to normal service with the next episode, where the guest will be, well, TBC. Watch this space, as they say. And yes, details I'm sure are in the notes, or Alex will give you the information out if you want to get in touch. But if you have that space where Alex could come and do some recording, and you have an idea of one, also if you'd like to get involved in this, or you've got any questions about starting your own podcast, I think we've established well and truly that Alex is the man in the know.
Here is our website as well, which is the shrewsburybiscuitpodcast.co.uk. It's powered by our friends at Web Orchard. We need to give them a mention. If you need a great website, if you've got a podcast, if you've got an Etsy account, if you've got a business, they will make the perfect website for you. You can also get in touch with us by that as well.
Okay, so that's weborchard.com. Remember that. Write it on the back of your hand, possibly even get it tattooed somewhere that you'll be able to see it and not forget. Alex, thanks very much for coming on and being a guest. If you want to reach out to me, you'll find me on social media at Ant McGinley. And a little plug for my podcast, which has actually turned into a live show. We've done the Leicester Comedy Festival. We're possibly taking it to the Edinburgh Fringe. It is Wrestling with the Champ. You'll find it, as they say, all the places you would normally find a podcast. and it's me with 80s big hair, looks like that. And occasionally you might spot a voice that sounds a little bit like today's guest.
Thank you very much for tuning in. And I love you, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
Anytime.